Having experienced various jobs and facing rejection a few times, there was one rejection that stood out: my application to a car dealership. After a brief stint as a telemarketer for a long-distance phone company, the allure of sales had captivated me, and I yearned to sell cars. The potential for financial gain, coupled with my outgoing nature, which thrived on daily interactions with people, made it an appealing career choice. However, there was one significant aspect of my identity that set me apart. I was a male with long hair, and I held a deep disdain for having it cut short, as it severely impacted my self-esteem. One day, determined to explore the industry, I visited several dealerships, engaging in conversations with management to gain insights. Among the places I visited, one dealership specialized in Volvo cars. During my visit, I found myself engaged in a conversation with Tommy, the sales manager, which unexpectedly transformed into an impromptu interview. Throughout the conversation, I also interacted with John, the highest-ranking salesman at the dealership, or so I believe. Although it was a long time ago, approximately 17 years, the details have become somewhat hazy. Nevertheless, I recall spending a couple of hours exchanging thoughts about cars, market trends, expectations, and professional experiences. Eventually, our discussion turned to the topic of the dealership's dress code. I had dressed appropriately for the occasion, wearing slacks, dress shoes, and a collared button-up shirt. However, my distinctive long hair, meticulously tied into a neat tail with multiple hair ties, drew attention. They inquired if I would be willing to cut my hair, to which I responded honestly, stating that I would consider it provided there was a certain monetary incentive. While I was aware that sales in the dealership relied on commissions, I had already made up my mind regarding my hair. After that brief mention, we swiftly moved on to other matters. After approximately 4 hours of engaging conversation, I was dismissed and instructed to report to work promptly at 8 a.m. the next morning. They made it clear that any tardiness would result in being sent home. Overjoyed at the prospect of securing the job, I eagerly headed home to make preparations. Seeking guidance, I reached out to my brother, who possessed considerable experience in the industry, and sought his advice for the exciting journey that awaited me. The following day, I arrived at the dealership at 7:55 a.m., only to be informed that the staff was still in a meeting. I was instructed to wait and have a seat. However, the meeting dragged on until nearly 10 a.m., and it was then that Tommy noticed me. He apologized, explaining that they hadn't discussed my situation yet, and told me to go home, while assuring me that they would reach out to me later. As someone with sales experience, I understood the unspoken message behind his words, but I decided to play along. Returning home, I patiently waited for the next day before making the call myself. When Tommy finally answered the phone, he delivered the disappointing news, stating, "Yeah, we're looking for someone a little more company-oriented. Thank you for your time," before abruptly hanging up. I knew without a doubt that their decision was based on my unwillingness to cut my hair, and yet it didn't bother me. I remained steadfast in my resolve, unwavering in my decision not to sacrifice my hair unless my conditions were met. Their rejection wasn't what bothered me the most. What irked me was the fact that they had wasted my time, leading me to believe I had secured the position only to leave me hanging. I'm the kind of person who tends to stew on certain things, often concocting revenge scenarios in my mind, even if I never act upon them. Well, a few years later, an opportunity presented itself for me to exact a subtle form of retribution. In the United States, when starting a new job, you are required to fill out a W-4 form for tax purposes. On this form, you have the option to request additional money withheld from your paycheck for federal and/or state taxes. Personally, I always chose to have extra withheld, as it meant receiving a tax refund rather than having to pay in. Thus, I consistently saved the excess amount each year. As time went on, I got married, had children, and my tax refunds increased, although I would never justify having kids solely for the purpose of tax benefits. Around 2012, after spending a few years working as a truck driver and accumulating more savings, my family and I decided it was time to consider purchasing a newer vehicle. Still residing in the same area, we happened to drive past that very dealership, triggering a wave of memory. Having never shared this particular story with my wife, I realized I had completely forgotten about it until that moment. I decided to disclose the incident to her, and together we schemed a plan that was filled with thoughts of revenge and vengeance. Or at least that's how we jokingly referred to it. Let's set the record straight. I hadn't accumulated $100K in savings over the past few years. The realities of getting married, having kids, and other expenses tend to eat into your finances. However, we did manage to save a decent amount and were expecting a settlement from a lawsuit we filed against a former employer for retaliation. This gave us approximately $35K to work with. To kick off my revenge plan, I made a call to the dealership to confirm if Tommy was still employed there. Much to my delight, he was. This meant that the possibility of executing my revenge scheme was within reach. Taking the next step, I contacted the local police department and informed them that I would be carrying a substantial amount of cash to purchase a vehicle. I inquired about the possibility of having a police escort, and I discovered that I could hire an officer in uniform for private security at a rate of $30 per hour. This arrangement seemed perfect. Next, I visited the bank and had a conversation with the manager. I informed them that I would be making a significant cash withdrawal, followed by a deposit of the same cash into the same account a few hours later on the same day. While I didn't divulge the exact details, I mentioned that it was part of a revenge plan involving the illusion of making a substantial purchase. The manager simply shrugged and said, "It's your money. You can do whatever you want with it." With everything in place, I dressed in a nice suit and let my long hair flow freely as I headed to the dealership. Almost immediately, someone approached me, but I specifically requested to speak with Tommy using a friend's recommendation as a pretense. Tommy arrived, and if he recognized me, he certainly didn't show it, likely because nearly a decade had passed. We engaged in conversation, and I explained that I wanted to surprise my wife with a Volvo. I claimed that it was her all-time favorite car, which wasn't true, and that she deserved it. Furthermore, I emphasized that I wanted the car to be in red, her favorite color, which was true. I casually mentioned that I had a $30K budget to pay for the car in cash. No financing, no check, no money order, just cold, hard cash. I observed a gleam in Tommy's eyes as he processed this information. Curious about his commission structure, I asked if he was still on a commission-based salary as the manager. He admitted that he received a small salary but was expected to make sales, and he did earn commissions. Tommy proceeded to show me a few cars, but I insisted on a red one. Eventually, he presented a cherry red XC90 with all the bells and whistles, a true luxury vehicle. It boasted dual power leather seats, a CD player, a moonroof, and even a DVD system. The sticker price read $37K, but I made it clear that I wouldn't pay over $30K, including tax, title, and fees for the car. Tommy promised to speak with the owner, Bill, since it was a trade, in and a 6-year-old vehicle. He leaves to have a conversation with the owner, and I take the opportunity to explore the dealership, casually glancing at other cars on display. Moments later, he returns accompanied by a man whom he introduces as Bill, the owner of the dealership. We delve into negotiations about the price, and although Bill is willing to lower it slightly, he refuses to meet my desired price point. Letting out a sigh, I express my concerns about the specific vehicle and why I believe it's not worth the amount he's asking for. Drawing on my research and the insights shared by my knowledgeable brother, I mention the recalls affecting certain Volvo models, along with the related complaints from owners, crash test results, and other relevant detail. Bill's eyes widen as he absorbs this information. It becomes evident that I have an extensive understanding of cars, or rather, that my brother does. Bill excuses himself to run some numbers and returns with a proposal to sell the car for exactly $30K, not a penny less. Accepting the offer, I calmly instruct him to gather the necessary paperwork while I head to the bank to withdraw the funds. I also request a notary be present to notarize the title in my name, ensuring a seamless transfer of ownership on the same day. Taking the necessary precautions, I reach out to the police and hire an officer whom I discover is someone I went to school with, Mike. He curiously questions my decision to use cash instead of writing a check, and I cryptically assure him that he will understand once we arrive at the dealership. And so, escorted by a police officer, I make my way to the bank with $30,000 in cash. After completing the withdrawal, I head to the dealership where I specifically ask for Tommy. We proceed to Bill's office, where the notary is also present, ready with the required paperwork. Maintaining my composed facade, I insist on carefully reviewing all the documents before signing anything. The paperwork includes standard clauses for a used car purchase, emphasizing that it is sold as is without any implied warranty, and I ensure that they acknowledge my understanding of these terms and release them from liability. Now it's time to put on a show. As we engage in conversation, I deliberately wear a puzzled expression while glancing at Tommy. Sensing my confusion, he inquires if everything is all right. I respond, feigning familiarity, that he looks strangely familiar and that I've been trying to recall where I might have seen him before. Taking the opportunity to interject, Bill confidently declares, Tommy has been the sales manager here at Business Name for 15 years. My eyes widen in recognition. Hold on a minute. You were working here back in 2? Tommy confirms, yes. Realizing the connection, I continue, I remember you now. I had an interview with you back in 2 when I was trying to get into car sales. I went through a 4-hour interview process with you and John. I'm sure you don't remember me. It was a long time ago. Tommy surprises me saying, Of course I remember you. I remember the hair. Feeling a mix of astonishment and frustration, I press on. Do you remember not hiring me because I wouldn't cut my hair? Tommy's eyebrows arch ever so slightly, while Bill interjects, What do you mean? I recount the entire encounter, explaining the demands made regarding my hair and how I was ultimately turned down for the job based on that factor. Bill responds, I'm sorry you had that experience. We do have an image to maintain, and men are expected to dress professionally. Not willing to let the issue go, I continue, Do you have any women on the sales floor, Bill? Bill responds affirmatively, We do. Seeking further clarification, I ask pointedly, Do they have long hair, Bill? Tommy seems perplexed, questioning, I don't see how that should factor into you buying a car. What's this about? Taking a stand, I make my intentions clear, stating firmly, You led me to believe I was being hired for a job here, which is what I wanted. You wasted my time, and this time it was my fault. I wasted my time. I knew that I knew you, but I couldn't place you. Bill, this money I retrieved the cash from my pocket is now going back into my account, and I will be purchasing a vehicle somewhere else. I refuse to spend money at a business that would treat potential employees like this. I put the cash away, feeling a sense of empowerment. So, sorry for wasting your time as well. I rise to leave, the police officer following closely behind. Bill and Tommy attempt to reason with me, but I request that the officer inform them I want no further contact with them. The officer relays my message, and they fall silent. Returning to the bank, I deposit the cash. Mike, the police officer, shares his opinion, suggesting that I should have moved on and forgotten about the incident. I shrug in response, acknowledging his point, but assert that Tommy will now have to face the consequences with Bill, as $30,000 in cash just walked out of their establishment. I inquire if I did anything illegal, to which he responds that he can't think of any wrongdoing on my part. Grateful for his assistance, I thank the officer and release him from any further obligations to me. Later, I learn that Tommy was eventually fired for discriminatory behavior towards multiple interviewees and employees. The fact that such a significant amount of cash simply walked out of their business further reinforced the consequences of his actions.